Good morning and welcome to the Courage Coalition. Today, our first episode, guest episode of 2026 is with somebody that I am excited to introduce you to, but also introduce myself to. Cindy Wittemann is a powerhouse, you guys. She has really taken the philosophy of what it means to want something different and find the resources, find the way. Cindy is a passionate advocate for positive change, a multi award winning author, media, entrepreneur, and visionary leader dedicated to making a difference. Based in San Antonio, Texas, she is the founder and editor in chief of Force Magazine, a global bestseller reaching readers in more than 13 countries. She is also the creator, excuse me, and host of the Little Give TV show, a cast member in the upcoming docuseries Legacy Makers releasing fall of 2025, and the owner of CF Views LLC, a storytelling platform built in the principle of valuing people over profit. And I'm going to leave it there because you know how I feel about bios. But Cindy, welcome and thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much. My goodness, when you read that, I'm like, I kind of want to meet that person.
So true, right? I love it. And there's so much more to your story, and there's so much more to your passion. And so I always invite guests to then tell me how you describe yourself.
My best nickname is Silly Cindy because I love to be silly. I like to make people laugh. I like to smile. I like to spread kindness. I feel like there's so much bad news out there, and it's really important that people who do see the world in a positive light share that with all those around them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So your journey actually began the day you were born. But
Yeah.
we forget about that, right? We tend to forget about that. And you've had to reintroduce yourself to that little girl later in life as life has happened. So tell us a little bit about how you got to be where you're at and the why before we dive into the pivot for 2026. How did Cindy get to be this real powerhouse in not just one, but you really hold dearly who you are as a whole? And I think that is so beautiful because the noise in our world tends to want us to be one thing, and it's not a true calling. So tell us a little bit how you got to be Cindy that you were born to be today.
Yeah, well, I think that you really can't understand a person until you understand the beginning. So, kind of the backstory is I grew up with a single mom, single parent family, and we were really poor. Like my mom was a wonderful, loving person. She taught me unconditional love, but she was terrible with money. So we really went without a lot of things. Sometimes running water, sometimes electricity, sometimes food, definitely transportation. And so I kind of grew up in that kind of realm. As I got older, I thought, well, the way to escape this, poverty and terrible situation is that I'll get married and start my own happily ever after, right?
Yes.
Except for it didn't really work out that way. I got married in my early teens and I ended up in a domestic violence relationship for almost 10 years. And
Wow.
so that was all things that taught me a lot of resilience and how to really overcome obstacles. So that's kind of like the backstory of where I started at.
Beautiful. And the pain in your nonprofit, right? Your nonprofit is such a beautiful reflection of your story, not only in childhood, but then in adulthood or your own home. So I love that, and we're going to dive into that. But listeners, if you did not listen to the first episode of 2026, I did go into a little bit of detail about this yearning that I have to start having conversations and asking questions that we're afraid to ask or have. Because I think that, I don't think, I know that when we are courageous enough to step into those conversations, not only do we bring compassion and thought processes to the conversation, but we open our own eyes and we open others who are hearing the conversation. Maybe not to a change in perspective or a change in beliefs. That's not the point. It's just to a change of mindset, a change of thought, and the acceptance of why we are all beautifully different and that we get to hold that difference in compassion and in love and not make so much about it. And what would change if these conversations and these questions started having more commonly? And Cindy, what I love is that one of the things you brought up, or you brought up a couple things, but one of the things is that money, right? We don't talk about money. And it's such a disservice to not only who you are right now, but every generation after you. And then you also talked about domestic violence. And I believe that we actually talk more about domestic violence than we talk about money. but we still don't talk about domestic violence enough either, right? Or getting out of the cycle of poverty. So, but those are just things that came to me when you were talking about that. So, I wanted to ask you, what is a question or a conversation that you believe either that you need to have more of, or that you hear in your community that is constantly being asked and people are afraid to ask the question or have the conversation?
Yeah, I think it's about the stigma around single parenthood. I grew up
Mm.
in a single parent home, and that was one of my big promises to myself. Was like I was never going to be that dreaded single mom. But through my journey, I realized that it wasn't a choice, and I do believe there's this huge stigma around single parenthood where people think, well, you must have done something, or and people kind of
Mhm.
have this negative connotation around it. When I find with my work with my nonprofit Driving Single Parents is that a lot of times these situations are made out of tragedy. Whether they got hit, their spouse got lost in a drunk driving accident where somebody hit them and they passed away from that, or we've had suicide, we've had military deaths, we've had cancer, life altering circumstances, domestic violence. There's just so many ways that single parenthood isn't a choice. It's kind of put on us. So I feel like I would love to have more conversations around how single parenthood is generally not a choice and how that is one of the hardest jobs in the world. And you won't find many people standing up in the morning going, you know what I'd love to do? I'd love to be a single parent. And I really wish we could kind of dispel all of that.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to go back a few steps because I also was raised in a home with a single mom and really took on a lot of those roles because she would work 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet. But I want to go back to what you or your experience was with just the stigma, whether that was as a child or as the single parent themselves, because each of us have a different belief based on the experiences we lived. And I think we need to also express why we feel this so that we can debunk it.
Yeah. Well, I myself had a stigma around it just because we grew up super poor, and I always thought, my dad paid his child support and I go to visit him and he had like a house and like food in the fridge and like you'd flip the switch and the lights would come on. It was like so cool. And I always thought like, man, if my mom had just stuck it out with my dad, then, we could be successful and why can't we have that life? And it's all based around this single parenthood. And I remember my mom telling me like, well, I'm a single parent. What am I supposed to do? I'm doing the best I can. And to me that at the time didn't feel like it was enough, but I obviously as a small child didn't realize the full spectrum of that. And
Right.
so yeah.
You know, you just bring up a really beautiful thing because it's kind of one of my pet peeves is this societal belief of what success looks like,
Hmm.
right? That word success. What does it mean to be successful? And as a child, we are instilled upon beliefs that we carry on throughout our adulthood about what success looks like. And so what you just explained to me here is that if you had a house and electricity and food in the refrigerator, you were successful. And don't get me wrong, those are basic necessities. But I want you to think about the beauty in the simplicity of what you thought success was,
Hmm.
or maybe still do, right?
Yeah.
Because of your own experiences. But if you're listening, it's a good time to really ask yourself, what is my definition of a success? What is my definition of making it? Because so many times we're telling stories that don't belong to us, or we're trying to hit accolades that do not belong to us. They belong to somebody else or somebody else's level of success. So when you were a child and basic necessities were your description of success. And so you believed, as so many women in this world believe, if I get married, it'll be okay, right? I'll have somebody else to take care of me. We'll have 2 incomes, whatever it is. It doesn't, but it's that happily ever after story that I don't want to say is devastating because I don't believe it is. I love happily ever after. I love Disney movies. I love all of those things. but I also don't believe I don't believe that you have to live in a fairy tale world to love all those things, right? So tell us how that level of success changed when you got married, and then the reality that came with, this is what my mom was talking about, or this is what my dad was talking about.
Yeah, so the reality was I got married and everything was great. I mean, we had our fifth wheel trailer. I mean, we were just living the life. We had a Volvo that you had to start with a screwdriver. I mean, we had transportation. We had food in the fridge. I mean, my husband had a job. It was like, man, I've been waiting for this my whole life, right? All happy. And everything seemed great. I ended up getting pregnant with twins, and then unfortunately, they passed away at birth. And so then everything still was, okay for a while. And I got pregnant with my daughter. And it was really weird because, like, after I got pregnant with my daughter, everything was great. I had my daughter, everything was wonderful. And then it was like, I know it sounds so cliche, I guess, like, but it was kind of like domestic violence they explain in the movies, right? Just all of a sudden one day it just snapped, changed. And then that's when the violence began. And then it was like, wait a second, like you're screwing up my entire happily ever after here, bro. Like, don't you know? I don't want to be a single parent. So because the violence was just towards me and it wasn't towards my daughters, I kept thinking, like I told you, I thought my mom should have made it work with my dad, and she could have done this and she could have done that. So there I was thinking, if I could just cook better, I could just clean better, I could just talk less, which would never happen. I don't even know why I thought for 1 second I was going to be able to talk less. But anyways, I really put it on myself as to I had to fix it. I needed to change to stop the behavior. And it was one day I was watching Dr. Phil, and Dr. Phil said, it's better to come from a broken home than it is to grow up in one. And
Oh,
that moment, almost 10 years into this marriage, I picked up my basket of clothes, a bag of diapers, my daughters, and we left, and I built a new life for us. And so I hope that answered your question.
wow, is all I have to say is like 10 years, and Dr. Phil's one comment was the conversation that needed to happen all along. And
Yeah,
he
because
did that.
he made it so clear as I thought I could fix it and all these things. But when he said that, it was like, wait a minute. I realized in that moment that I was actually dragging my daughters through hell and back, even though they weren't being abused, they were seeing the abuse,
Mhm.
and it was all because me avoiding this single parent journey.
Yeah. And because of the story you told yourself about what
Mhm.
success looked like, it meant being married and staying married, right?
Yeah,
Because that
and
was
having food.
that was the only thing we knew. You go from what you know. And I think that's such a powerful, oh my gosh, I'm like, that is so powerful way to describe beliefs that people just don't get, is that they are created when we don't even understand what's being created, and they lead our lives, and they led you to 10 years of a successful marriage, which was
Yeah.
so not successful.
Yes, and the other point I'd like to make is when you end up in these domestic violence situations, a lot of times the stories that you hold on to, they use against you. So in
Mm,
my situation, it was, if you ever leave me, you're going to be broke just like your mom. If you ever leave me, you're going to be on food stamps and welfare. If you ever leave me, not going to have electricity and running water, and you're going to be just like your mom. So he knew my beliefs,
yeah,
like you just said, from my childhood, and was able to use those against me to keep me from leaving, right? Because then
yeah,
I was didn't want to do what my mom did, and I didn't want my daughters to experience what I had experienced. So that kept me in my little box for so long.
yeah. He used your own fear against you, which is
Exactly.
so
Mhm.
common. And I,
So common.
so, well, first of all, God bless Dr. Phil. I'm so happy.
Yes.
I'm so
Changed
happy
my whole life and my
had
daughter's life too.
electricity and you were able to watch that episode that day. So you packed up whatever you had. How old were your girls at this point?
Geez, my oldest daughter must have been, my youngest daughter was 5 months old. So it's probably like 3, 2, and 5 months.
You had three daughters, three, two, and oh my gosh. I just want people to think about this for a second, okay? Because 3, 2, and 5 months, first of all, in a well secure home is an undertaking all in itself. And I can say that with all the experience in the world. So you leave. Where do you go, Cindy?
Well, I left. I actually went to my friend's house, my friend Jennifer. I went over to her house and I got my own apartment the very next day, which was a series of incidents happened that really helped me get to where I needed to go. So the fact that I was able to I wasn't even working, but we owned our own remodeling company. And so I was able to use that. And it was on my, credit history. So I
Yeah.
was able to get my own apartment. I moved in the very next day.
Okay.
So that's where I went. And I got my job and eventually enrolled in college and all the things.
Wow. Okay. So, what we were going to go back to is revisiting what you said about that definition of what you thought success was. And so, even though you were staying in a marriage and you were the one being abused, what Dr. Phil said is that it doesn't matter because you're raising them in an abusive home. And
Hmm.
I want to really talk about this a little bit because I know that through your nonprofit work, I'm sure you've seen this a million times. And I do believe that what one of the conversations we need to have more of is that trauma one looks so many different ways. There's no definition of what is traumatic. And here's what I want to explain to people listening is that Cindy and I could be sisters and we could be in the exact same household. Let's just say her household. And the way she experienced poverty of her mother's life and the way I experienced poverty of that same mother's life can completely change our brains in different ways. I could maybe walk away with no issues. Like, yeah, she was poor, but she worked hard. She was such a good mom and no big deal. And Cindy could walk away with a story of is the only way I'll be safe is if I have security in the marriage, right? So first of all, that is the basics. That's like the basic 101 of trauma.
Yeah.
And what we forget about is that as mothers, as daughters, as grandmothers, whatever, every time Cindy got pregnant and had another child, her DNA was actually changed because every time she suffered a blow, fear, fight or flight, all of that changed the brain DNA, the body DNA. And so she passed that on to every one of her daughters. Okay. So that's like the foundation part of it. But then, even if her daughters were asleep and never heard a blow, never heard a scream or fear, when they woke up the next morning, they actually took it from Cindy's body, right? You can't live in a fear-based place or in concern of your life and not emit different hormones. So I think that the power of what Dr. Phil said that day is so beyond what people think it is, right? Because removing yourself out of a relationship is actually creating safety for your children, even if it's worse off financially.
Hmm.
How do you feel about what I just said? And like, what are your thoughts on that? Or what I'm sure you've completely educated yourself in so many ways since that day that you left the trailer after Dr. Phil's comment.
Yeah, I feel like, you do your best to
Yeah.
try to shield your children, your family, and you try to, I actually wrote a book called Beyond the Smile, and the title of that book is all about that. It's all about after the abuse happens, going to a family gathering, going to the grocery store, having people over, and you're there smiling, even though you're just smiling through the pain, and you do your best to not put that pain on somebody else or make somebody concerned or worried or your daughter scared. But I do feel like it probably did come out and nobody just really knew
Right.
at the time.
Okay, so when you talk about removing the stigma of single parenthood, what do you wish? I
I
guess
wish
those
that
people.
people I wish that people would understand that it's not a choice most of the time. I mean, I would say like 99% of the time, it's not a choice. Something has happened that is totally not what was planned at all.
Right. I guess here's the question I want to ask is if we could change the conversation around single parenthood, or if we could ask different questions. Let's just say so I've been married to my high school sweetheart for 30 years. I don't know single parenthood, right? So if you and I were having a conversation outside of the podcast, in the podcast, and you were in the midst of single parenthood, which you're not now, but if you were at that point, can you think back and just what is the question or maybe it's not a question, but maybe it's like, I hate the word, how can I help you? Right? Because I mean,
Yeah.
it's so generic. What could we say? How could we change that conversation to actually support women and men, right? Women and men in
Yes.
single parenthood, because the women aren't necessarily always good either, right? So there's a lot of
Right.
single dads
That's
also.
true. We've given
And
away cars to single dads. Hmm.
have you? That's so great because again, we have this belief that what? Men are the main financial bearers, and so maybe they will never have a financial issue, but that's not always true in today's world. There are a lot of homes that women are the primary source of income, and if there's a split, then what does the guy do? What does the dad do? So I love that.
Exactly.
So how do we change that conversation, or how do we support those people that we love that are going through this more?
I think just a simple statement of, I see you. I see how hard you're working. I see how much sacrifice you're making to put food on the table and take care of these kids on your own. I see you. Because it's so often that people see you as, oh, wonder what she did, and they have this stigma around single parenthood, or wonder what he did. The stigma, instead of the support, it's judgment. And I think if anybody has someone, a friend, a family member, a sister, a brother, anybody who is experiencing single parenthood, I think just wrapping your arms around them, saying, I see you. I know how hard it is, and I fully support you. And I can't imagine how hard it is for you to get this done, but you're doing it with grace. And just that acknowledgement in a positive way, I think really would have helped me a lot.
I love that. And I have to say, like, going back, and I think about growing up, right? And all the finger pointing of, like, if she would have only done this, if she would have only, I mean, I'll own it. We've had these conversations, so this is a healthy conversation for me. But I had a conversation last year and a half or so. I've just really been, if I have a feeling about my mom, I'm having a conversation, because we don't know how long I'll have her, right? She could be
Yeah.
gone tomorrow for all we know. And about a year and a half ago, I said, I just want you to know that I see you. I exactly said those words. I see you. I don't know
Beautiful.
how you did what you did as a mother. And even though there are things that I'm so hurt by, I see that you tried to the level that you could have tried at that point to be everything that you could be to us. Because it
Yeah.
is, I mean, she worked 2 or 3 jobs. She had 5 kids at home. Single parenting is an extremely hard job. What I want to ask though now is that, so you're no longer a single parent. You actually have a mixed family, a combined family. And how 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 different do you think single parenting would have worked, or didn't work, or continually will work, to change that, when we have this philosophy? Because I'm saying quote unquote philosophy, because it's just as good as it is the two people involved, of co-parenting after a split. And I ask this because I've seen both sides of that. I've seen the ones where the parents cannot stand each other, and I was a part of that story also. Or the parents that, even though they can't stand each other, the kids may never know it because they act
Yeah.
like it's perfect when they're together with the kids.
Yeah.
How could that change, or maybe even make it worse? I mean, what is your thoughts on that whole philosophy that we're bringing into this world of co-parent? It's not co-parenting. What's the word I'm thinking of that I'm missing here? I don't know, but you know what I'm saying. It was two people that are
Yeah.
divorced, and they really support their children together, not as individual homes.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. And I think it's a lot of putting aside the feelings you have for the other person and making it all about the kids.
Mhm.
And, it's situations I've seen with friends, family, everybody that, sometimes that when you're with mom, you're supposed to hate dad. When you're with dad, you're supposed to hate mom. And, and that's just not healthy. Or if they do both go to the same event, you have to go over here and hug this side of the family and go over there and hug the other side of the family. And that's really difficult, I think, for the kids. As they grow up, they learn that tension and that stress, and then they start to try to manage it so everybody could be happy and support them. And I think it's really, really, really important to kind of put your own stuff aside and make sure that that kid loves both sides of themselves, because as you know, the DNA comes half from mom, half from dad, right? So if you're saying one part's bad, that means half of that child is bad. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge that and be adults and take that all out and just focus on the kids.
I love that you bring this up, because you're just like, you're talking to my heart. That was my story. And I thought I was bad because my mom hated my dad so much, and I
Mhm.
loved him so much. Even though he maybe deserved my love or didn't deserve my love, I loved him because I was a little girl. And I don't think that we think about that enough, is that you're telling your
Mhm.
child, because that's their father,
Mhm.
that they're bad, or that they're,
Half of them.
yeah,
Yeah.
half of them is bad. But I want to take it back even a step more, because this is one of the stories that comes up for me a lot in foster care, is that how can you welcome the biological family into your home? How can you have conversations and welcome the connection? How can you, and what I don't believe we talk enough about also is that when our stereotypes, our stories, our beliefs are creating the divide that actually does not allow that person to heal. And this could be your child, you guys. This could be your child you're talking about, right? If you're in a divorce, when we support that child, no matter what our beliefs are or what grip we have on what it looks like, we are telling them we will support you no matter what, which
Hmm.
most children do not have that knowledge. They truly believe that they're only supported if they act a certain way. And can you walk us through? I don't know your whole story. So did you have any experiences like this with your husband because he was abusive towards you? Your fear, right, towards letting him see the girls if he got to see the girls.
Yeah, his rights were terminated, so that
Okay.
was not an issue. Hmm.
Okay. And how then have you helped your children or your daughters walk
Well,
through that?
one Well, I never told them anything bad about their dad. I never expressed any hatred, any anger, any frustration, anything, and always supported as they grew. My oldest daughter's 28 years old now,
Okay.
and so I always supported. Hey, they wanted to reconnect with their dad, and they did, and then they may or may not have decided that that was
Mhm.
not what was best for them as adults.
Yeah.
But I supported them 100%. Hey, you want to? You want to foster that? I mean, I totally foster that relationship. I mean, I have nothing bad to say
Yeah.
because, like I said, what happened, that many years ago. Geez, I mean, what 25 plus years ago. Is I'm sure he's not that person, the same person as he was then, and I'm not the same person that I was then. And
Right.
so I feel like it's up to them for them to establish a relationship if they want to, and then them to grow that and build on that relationship if it's something that really fits into their life. And so always just being supportive of them and their decisions. My oldest daughter, when she had her first child, she had a baby shower at my house. I invited him over. He came to the baby shower, and that was that, because that was my daughter wanted. She wanted him there for the baby shower. So I fully invited him into my own home and allowed him to come and be a part of that. And because it's not about me, it's
Right.
not about me. It's about them, and their children and what's best for them. And are at an age to protect themselves at this point. And so I just foster whatever I can to support and love my daughters as much as I possibly can.
I love that, Cindy. It's a beautiful testimony to true compassion, right? To true compassion, and love does it. You can talk all you want, but your actions are going to tell you everything, to your child, to yourself, to those around you watching. And we are always being watched. That is for sure. Whether
That's right.
you're in the spotlight like Cindy or not, you are always being watched. Whether that's just by your children.
Yeah, and by
So
example.
yes, by example. So I want to talk about the nonprofit a little bit because this came from the story. And you talk about the stigma of being a single parent. And so what I would love to kind of dive into is part of the stigma, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe this is your story, maybe it's not, is that being a single parent, especially women, um, and I say that, you guys, with a grain of salt, but statistically, women make less money. They stay at home. So if they do leave, they leave with no education or no work background. They tend to statistically have less degrees. There's so many things we can talk about. They have less history with money. Remember, women didn't have rights to money until the late 1960s, right? Think about that for a second. So there's so many things around money that in statistics, not across the board, just statistically, about women, if when there is a split, having a harder time making ends meet. And for many women, and this again is statistically, they don't get child support like Cindy's mom did. There are so many, 64% of all child custody cases to go unpaid, is something like that. It's insane. So let's talk about the stigma around poverty, because so many single moms live in poverty or just above poverty to stay where they can't even ask for help.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the things, like you mentioned, the nonprofit is when I built the nonprofit, I really wanted to make sure it wasn't going to be a bunch of red tape. because I feel like there's so many families who get trapped in poverty because you get, like, say for instance, you're under the poverty line, you get food stamps, you get free medical, you get benefits, some benefits, not enough to really get you to where you need to
Right.
be, but to keep you floating. And then if you just make $1 more than a certain amount, you lose your benefits.
Yeah.
So many people can't find a job or get a raise enough to cover the food stamps and the Medicaid that they are receiving. So they turn down jobs.
Yeah.
They don't get further and higher and do better for themselves because they can't afford to, not because
Right.
they don't want to. Another problem is the child care. If you are on government assistance for child care, which there are limited resources and long waiting lists, but if you happen to be one of the lucky ones who actually get that child care, and you're getting your child care at a lower rate, say it's $50 a week instead of $350 a week, and then you get at your boss offers you a job where you're going to make $1 more an hour, it's going to put you just enough, but now you're losing $1,200 a month in
Yeah.
childcare, and there's not enough in your new raise to get to the next level. And so I feel like their system is kind of in a way that keeps people from
They,
growing.
yeah. They keep us poor. They keep the
Yeah.
poverty level where it's at because of that red tape. So
Yeah.
your organization, your nonprofit, earns money, gets donations to give cars to single parents who are really in that place that you just described.
Yeah. And so really what I like to say is we help the people who are in the messy middle. We don't help people with cars that are going to have to live in the car.
Okay.
We want to help somebody who's already trying to get themselves to the next level. They just need the tool.
The
And
tool.
so that tool, being a car, can get them to higher education. We've had people graduate with their bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, associate's degrees, become a dental hygienist. We have one right now in school who's about to become a dentist. So they are able to use the vehicle as that tool that can get them to higher education or can get them to a job that is across town or further away that pays much more, rather than a job that can only strictly be accessed by walking or the bus service. And
Yeah.
so it really does help them get to that next level. And so that messy middle is what we try to help people with, because they don't necessarily qualify for all those benefits. And then, of course, like I said, they're not going to have to live in the car. It's actually going to help propel them to the next level.
Yeah. It just dawned on me. Here's the question or the conversation that I think is coming out of this. And I love it because how many times have you heard, well, if they would just do away with food stamps, if they would just do away with HUD, whatever, then they would have to get a job. But what you just described is actually, this is the foundation of it. So this is the conversation is that why do we believe that everybody in the welfare system, and I hate that word, but I'm just going to use it because everyone knows what I'm talking about when I say that, is there because they're lazy or they're a drug addict or they're never going to amount to anything.
Mm-mm.
I think back to my childhood, and my mom was a registered nurse. So she had a degree, but working full time as a registered nurse still couldn't pay the bills. Just the basic bills. She then got a job working evenings after being a nurse all day. She would go and work at another clinic in the evenings to make ends meet. And as a mom of five, she needed help with daycare because daycare has always been one of the most astronomical costs of any household. My mom would pay the
Mortgage
daycare.
payment.
Yes. Yeah. She'd pay the daycare bill before she'd pay the rent bill because
Yeah.
she had to go to work. So she had to have daycare.
Yep.
Anywho, she ended up getting government help for the daycare at one
Thank
point.
goodness.
And I could vividly remember feeling the relief in her soul. But here's the flip side, you guys. She got a raise. She didn't report it at the time. She ended up having to pay the government back like $7,000.
Yeah.
So not only because she got that $1 raise or she got whatever that raise was that wouldn't have allowed her to pay for that daycare. That is such, I mean, there's so many words for this, but it freaking pisses me off. Like, how is this possible that we can punish people who are doing the right thing, trying to do the right thing, trying to do it on their own in this way?
Absolutely. And I want to take back some of the words you used earlier, which when you said, a lot of times we become a single parent, the other parent is the one who holds all the finances and they're the ones working. And maybe the other parent's staying at home with the children and they don't have any financial resources when they choose to leave that situation because of whatever has happened or happening. And then they don't have any financial resources. So that government assistance that you just said, man, that some people think that it should go away, that government assistance that's available may be the only thing that gets a woman out of a domestic violence situation. It may be the only way that she can, or a man can, get to that safe place while being able to feed their children and house them. So it is very, very common that people stay in an abusive relationship or stay in a situation that's not healthy because they can't afford to do anything else. And that government assistance sometimes is the only hand that they have to lean on.
Absolutely. And I think of this, so believe it or not, you guys, this actually holds prisoner more women in wealthy homes than in non-wealthy homes because of the stigma around the life that's going to change. And that breaks my heart too, because we believe that where you live and what you drive and all these things are about who you are. But what about the woman that leaves and loses all of that? Why don't we celebrate her? Celebrate her fear, her courage, her choice to not allow something to continue through the legacy of what she leaves. I think about that, right? It is so, so critical that we really rewrite what it means, what success means. Because women leaving in spite of fear or courage, or men leaving in spite of infidelity or fear too. I mean, I know men who've been abused by women.
Yeah.
Um, that is what we should be celebrating. Like, you are taking a step forth with no idea of what your future holds. You
Mm-hmm.
literally could be on the streets tomorrow. You have no idea, but you're still going to take that step, not out of irresponsibility, out of freedom, out of the right choice of doing the hard thing. And when you talk about that, why do we have this stigma about what you did wrong? What about what you did right? Why can't we
Mm-hmm.
reframe that and ask, oh my gosh, what happened? And you are so amazing for taking that leap, right?
Because it's definitely not the easy way out.
No, nope, nope. Comfort zones are always easier to stay in. And even in abuse, everyone's like, well, that's not comfort. Yes, it is. Abuse is comfort because you know what to expect. The unexpected is actually the scariest thing you will ever do with no
Mm-hmm.
knowledge of what comes next.
Yeah.
And I go back to my foster kiddos and the foster system on this, because the reason the cycles continue is because they know what to expect, right? No
Mm-hmm.
matter how bad it is, no matter what is happening, they know what to expect. And that is security, even when it's harm.
So hard.
So hard. So, Cindy, if you had one thing to leave our guests as we wrap up, that, maybe it's a single mom, maybe it's somebody that's actually needing to leave and hasn't found that courage to do so, what would you tell them, or what would you do? Maybe telling them is wrong, right? Because sometimes we like to preach instead of teach. Um, Talk about, what would you do if you were having a conversation with them right now?
What's coming up for me in this moment is just a Henry Ford quote, which is, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. And
Yes,
so you have the opportunity to do something different if you're in a place where you're not happy or you're not safe. It's not a good situation for you or your family. I really feel like there is a way out, and then whether you think you can or can't, you're right.
you're right. And no one said it would be easy, but it will
It's
be
not
worth
easy.
it.
That's right. It will
Yeah,
be worth it. It's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but you know what? In the end, when you get past it and you stand up and you go, how the heck did I do that? There's a very big sense of pride. And your kids say, Mom, I don't know how you did it. When they have their children and they're like, how did you do this? And you can be like, I have no idea. I just put my
just
boots on
did
and
it.
got up every single day and just, whether
Yeah,
it be selling plasma or working two jobs or putting myself through school or whatever I had to do, I did it and I don't know how, but I made it on the other side and you can too.
oh, Cindy, I love that. I love that. That is your definition of courage. And I hope you guys heard that really well, because She didn't talk about just taking the next step. She talked about selling plasma, taking the next best step in whatever way you can foresee it. And your way is going to be different than somebody else's. So
Exactly.
remember, there's always another choice, there's always another option. You have to allow yourself to see it all, though. You release the grip on what earning money looks like, release the grip on what success looks like. And I have to go back because I said release the grip on what money looks like, but remember to always cherish and give grace to yourself, and that you never have to do what is harmful to yourself in spite of money. So, Cindy, I cannot tell you just how grateful I am to have you on, how grateful I am for all the messages that you really bring to this world in everything that you do. But if people want to know more about you, where to find you, what's coming up next in your life, more about Force Magazine, whatever it is, what is the best place they can go to find you?
Yeah, so you go to cindywitteman.com. So CindywItteman.com. Pretty much everything's there. And for Force Magazine, you can just go to forcemagazine.com. I try to make it as easy as possible for everyone. Anybody who's listening, please do feel free to find me online. Join me on socials. I'd love to get to know you. Send me a DM, an email. I'd love to chat and see how I can help in any way possible.
Oh, thank you so much, Cindy. Remember, everybody, the best thing you can do to help us spread the message, whether it's for you or your community, is just download and share the podcast. Maybe somebody in your community needs to hear exactly what Cindy had to say today, what we talked about today. And I will end every episode this way. Love you, mean it. Until next time.
Until next time, thank you for having me on today.